We've heard from NUMSA about their concerns where the welfare of employees affected by the suspension is concerned. Let's now take a look at the rights of consumers. We're joined by Wendy Knowler, consumer rights expert. Wendy, thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. We've heard from a number of frustrated passengers who have clearly expressed how poorly managed the situation has been, especially on the part of communication. Some were even allowed to check in only to get to the airport and be told, well, the flights have been grounded. Some still not having received SMSs in terms of what is happening with the situation. In this scenario, what rights do consumers have?
Okay, so first of all, it was an awful situation for all those passengers. I think for the staff as well, let's acknowledge, who found themselves manning those desks in the airports. There was an understandable flow of abuse and frustration coming from passengers who just wanted refunds in their hands and didn't get them, and suddenly, couldn't find, if they could find alternative tickets on other flights that day, Saturday or Sunday, they were, prohibitively expensive. So, really a terrible situation. In terms of rights, this is always difficult. The airline industry globally tends to do its own thing, but we do have the Consumer Protection Act in this country, and I've been trying to get a statement out of the Ombudsman for Consumer Goods and Services around rights of consumers as they see it, because there's the Consumer Protection Act and there are individual situations where, you need an interpretation. The statement is pending. It's not yet out. It's not signed off. But I was pointed to Section 47 of the CPA, which states essentially that if you book and pay for a service that you don't get at the specified time, you're entitled to a refund plus interest, as well as any direct out-of-pocket costs. So you could arguably say those people who ended their holiday on Saturday or Sunday and were flying home and couldn't get on their kulula or BA flight and couldn't get a seat on an alternative flight, if they had to spend another night in a hotel or the B&B or whatever it was, you could argue that in terms of the Act's reading, that would be a direct cost. But I can't see that actually happening, to be honest. We'll see. As I say, we're looking forward to that Ombudsman statement. But there is an out if the failure to provide the services, if a supplier, if that was beyond the supplier's control, right? Except you can't rely on that if your failure to perform led to that inability to supply. So in this situation, you could say, did Comair's administrative issues, as they are terming it, safety issues, as the CAA is terming it, did that lead to the suspension of operations? Well, yes. So I've put all these questions to Comair, and I'm waiting for a response. But their own policies say BA, passengers can get a refund. Unfortunately, kulula ones must accept a credit, a refund, but it's a refund to their travel voucher, so they have to spend it on a Comair flight, and it's only valid for 6 months, which again the CPA says must be valid for 3 years. So there are a lot of issues where internal policies are not exactly aligning with what the Consumer Protection Act says, and we'll have to see how that plays out.
Then you have this element of the situation where there are people who are taking advantage of this situation. A friend who's in Cape Town with her family has had to pay, 5 times more for them to come back to Johannesburg, where that is concerned. What can consumers do, really? Is this even playing fair?
That's an interesting one, because obviously I canvassed that with FlySafair, for example, and they said that's not the case. In fact, at the weekend, they didn't even have humans on duty to sort of change any prices. It's all computerized, and how it works in the airline industry, and a lot of us who travel often would have experienced this. The early you book, the cheaper the flights, right? So FlySafair says the first flights sold on any particular, the first seats rather, sold on any particular flight, actually operating at a loss. And then as the time towards the departure carries on, so the prices increase. And, the last ones sold are the most expensive. So on a flight on today, for example, somebody was trying to book it. The prices range from 500 Rand for the first prices, seats booked before this crisis, to 3,500 Rand. We're talking one way. This was Durban to Cape Town, on the same flight. So it's all about a timing, and they're denying any price gouging. They're saying this is the way pricing on any airline works, and that while they're not, they're happy to pick up the tickets, but ultimately this is bad for everybody, because South African flying public needs to be able to have trust in carriers when they book and pay for a ticket up front, because so much is at stake in terms of we book that ticket because we need to be somewhere at a certain time, and when that doesn't happen, it's massively inconvenient. I know somebody that missed a funeral, somebody else that missed a brother's 50th birthday celebration. It's really, really awful.
You speak of trust, and here, trust is everything, as you have outlined. Do you perceive that from a reputation point of view, while I appreciate you are by no means or no stretch of the imagination a reputation expert, but that Comair can come out of this?
Well, they've come out of other dramas. They were, as we heard the CEO say, they had issues with the various levels of COVID. They had issues with the company going under business rescue. Tickets are still being bought. They hold something like 40% of the tickets, particularly on Sunday Saturday when the drama started to unfold. So that's a lot of. These seats are obviously needed. If you look at, I don't know if you remember, around 2019, 2020, Comair was also grounded a couple of times by the Civil Aviation Authority over safety concerns, which they were later vindicated over. But, a lot of people then were saying, we're never going to do this again. Interestingly, they did refund. It took a long time in many cases, but they did refund. And they're up and running and flying, being supported by the public. So I think needs must, I think the reputational damage in many cases is short-lived, and then the public recovers and trusts again.